Welcome back. So I'm going to do a video today that's a little different. That's a lot different, actually. And it's based on me watching this last night. Untold, Crime, and Penalties. So it's on Netflix. Pretty sure to be on both sides of the border, American Netflix and Canadian. The Untold, I have to say, the Untold documentaries that I've watched have been fascinating. But I wanted to go through this. So after watching Untold and hearing all of this, which is basically about how a member of the mafia bought himself a hockey team for his kid. And it's interesting because his kid put together a decent team-ish. So, and I don't want to spoil it too much, but I'm just surprised, very, very surprised, that I wasn't aware of any of this. Now, I get that it's the United Hockey League, and that really, once you get into the lower levels of hockey, you're going to get into the slap shot style of hockey, but these guys took it to a whole other level. And that was the plan. The plan was we're basically going to beat people up. But they also had some goal scorers. So I was looking at their lineups, their 2 years of existence, and they had guys who could put the puck in the net. They had guys who could score, and their numbers were good. The thing was, they also had a lot of guys who could throw punches, and that was kind of their job. Their job was to go out there and throw punches. But even those guys, their point totals, not bad. So they were founded in April 1st of 2004, but there's a lot of other storylines in here too that I want to get into, because when I watch a documentary like this, I always think, okay, so how much are they skipping on? So you're going to see them skipping around a bit. Like, they started interviewing players like they were founding members, and there were a couple of cases where I'm like, well, wait, they got this guy in a trade. So I didn't want to get into the minutia of that because that's not as important. But anytime that I watch, documentary stuff, I like to dig a little bit into it. So Jimmy Galante paid $500,000 for franchising rights. So $500,000 up front. You got to think it was in duffel bags. And then $1.5 million paid to expand capacity from 750 to 3,000 in the Danbury Ice Arena, which is still used now. I'm going to go out on a limb and say, without this money, which may have been in duffel bags of $1.5 million, yes, there may have been racketeering involved, but, and again, I cannot recommend this enough. This was just awesome. But if not for Jimmy Galante being willing to pay this, does Danbury still have a healthy hockey market? That's the question I have. And I'm wearing Whalers because this is in Connecticut. And, of course, we all know that, people would love to see the Hartford Whalers go back to... Maybe put them in Danbury. Maybe when we're talking about teams moving and everything, just, I don't know, throw a team in Danbury. Maybe Jimmy's got some money hanging around. One of my favorite things in the documentary is the players talking about just getting cash. Just, here's money. And the players being like, what? Yeah, we're giving you cash. And that they were getting paychecks for companies they never worked for. So, basically, this was a team that set a league penalty minutes record in its first season. And I believe they broke that record in the second season. But this was a team that got a lot of penalty minutes, and it was on purpose. We're going to be the bad boys of the league, and they were. And even though the commissioner said don't, they went, who are you? We're going to do it anyways. And they did. They were second in the division in year one, and they were called the Trashers because he owned waste management companies. They also mentioned in the documentary he had a picture from James Gandolfini, Tony Soprano, addressed to him as, to Jimmy, the real Tony Soprano. Right? So that was kind of, well, it's an interesting part of the documentary there. So in their first season, they set a league record in penalty minutes. They were second in their division the first year, and they lost to the Muskegon Fury. Not talked about at all in the documentary. It's year two that they lost the finals to Kalamazoo, to the K-Wings. And that was a brutal feud between those two teams, where Kalamazoo was just trying to survive. Basically, from the looks of it in the documentary, you were going into a game against Danbury with the idea of, well, we hope we live tonight. And you know what surprised me too was that, and I'm trying to think of the name of the player now that was targeted. in their second matchup. At least it looked like it was the second matchup, although there were other brawls that took place. I was really surprised that Kalamazoo didn't just bench the player. If you're a coach and you know that you are going into enemy territory and you've got a player that they'd really like to put him in a wheelchair and end his career, you might say, you know what? Tonight you've got the night off. We're going into this potentially brutal setup in Danbury. I'd rather that you didn't play in this game. We value your life. So the fact that he's in the lineup kind of made me curious about what's going on there. Now, the other thing that happens in this is that there's a brawl. The owner gets into it with, now the documentary said it was a referee. It was a linesman. So he punches a linesman at the penalty box. But the linesman as well was suspended 5 games for his role in this. And it was the linesman that went to the prosecutors who were trying to, get Galante on an assault charge and say, just drop it. So the linesman himself said, let's just drop the charge. So it's not as... And again, I think really what they were going for with the documentary was really the sensationalistic side of it. And again, when you're watching documentaries, they will very often have their own story they want to tell from their own angle. So the idea that the linesman was involved to the point where he got suspended, not talked about, and just after the brawl, the team went 8-2 in their next 10. Then they had another brawl. So there was lots of brawling going on, and that led to the coach being suspended for being unable to control his players. Interestingly enough, AJ, the owner, the 17-year-old owner for the team, his own high school hockey coach, he made the assistant coach of the Danbury Trashers. So, yeah, interesting, right? So it is interesting too to see the coach being suspended because players were leaving the bench, players were coming out of the penalty box, and yeah, so that's and it's at the NHL level, player leaves the bench, the coach can get in trouble for that too. And the funny part is that the payroll for the team that we know of, $750,000. The league's salary cap was $275,000. So just a little bit over. Just a little bit above the cap. And I don't remember that being mentioned either because as I'm watching this documentary, I'm like, that's fascinating. So I'm looking all this up and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And this was one thing I found. It was like $750,000. So being that far above the cap is probably giving you a competitive advantage. Being able to call up Brent Gretzky and say, hey, so here's some duffel bags. Calling up Michael Rupp and going, hey, so we remember you scored that big goal for New Jersey in the Stanley Cup final. How would you like to come down and play for us? So Rupp's like, all right. And his agent told him they're paying you in cash. And it's like, huh? So what's interesting is that all this happens. And of course, after 2 years, Jimmy Galante's taken down and the team was dissolved due to not being able to cover their costs. Travel costs, everything else. Suddenly, all of the money that was being provided to these players is gone, so the team is done. But Danbury has had a healthy hockey market since. So again, the building went from a 750 capacity to 3,000. They had the Danbury Trashers first from 04 to 06. 06, 07, they had the New England Stars. So this was the year after they had another team. 2008, 2009, they had the Mad Hatters. Then they had the Whalers, 2010 to 2015. The Titans from 2015 to 2017. The Connecticut Whale. You guys have heard of the Connecticut Whale, haven't you? 2015 until now. They play in the same rink. And the Danbury Hat Tricks. I was on their site today. Their jersey, honestly, is kind of fun. And I this was when I started going, hats. What is it with hats? So the Trashers' idea being that, the mafia-connected individual thought, yeah, I've got all these trash businesses. I'm going to, Trashers works. But what's with hats? So what's interesting with the Hat Tricks is that they opted out of this past season due to the pandemic, right? So they're coming back for this season. But why Hat Tricks? And I saw Mad Hatters. And I thought, okay, so this can't just be a coincidence that there's hats involved. Why weren't hats mentioned in the documentary? So the hat-making industry in Danbury, Connecticut dates back to the 18th century. oh yes, we're going to do a little bit of a history lesson on this because it's fascinating. And it was decided to make that a focal point for where to produce hats and all this because of the abundant population of rabbits and beavers that they would use for pelts for hats. And there was lots of forest there as well to build with and to have firewood. So it was a perfect spot for making hats. 1809, they had 56 hat shops in Danbury, Connecticut. So I was like, all right, so that makes sense for Mad Hatters and hat tricks. But there's more. In 1880, Danbury produced 4.5 million hats. That seems like a lot of hats. It's just one of these fascinating things that, again, as you go deeper into this story, it's just fun. And now all of a sudden I'm like, so where am I going to go to Danbury, Connecticut? When's that going to happen? When do I get to meet Section 102? They seem like very nice, reasonable people. Because fun hockey fans, right? And then I had the question in my head, too, of, okay, so they had Section 102, which was the more rambunctious fans, right, for the Trashers. Does that still exist for the Hat Tricks? Is this still a thing for the teams they have now? Or did this, when the Trashers went, does this mean that the other teams didn't have that same rabid fan base in Section 102 that gave the other teams such a hard time and you know, was just over the top crazy? So lots of questions are still out there for me. Now, what hurt the industry in hat making was that people unionized and they went on strike because they were having a problem with mercury poisoning. Right. So mercury exposure, which was in part from a solution that the hatters were washing pelts in, it was causing like tremors. So it was causing nervous system damage from mercury exposure, and people were having problems with tremors that had worked in that industry. So eventually, the hat making industry moves on. From what I can see, there's no more large scale hat making done in Danbury, but their teams still recognize that part of their history. The Hat Tricks, fun little hat, like it's like a bunny rabbit with a magic hat on it. And at first I was like, wait, so they had the Mad Hatters, now the Hat Tricks. So that's like are they the Alice in Wonderland thing? No, not really. But it is kind of a fun name for a team, isn't it? Which of course people will point out too. Trashers, that's just Thrashers without the H. Yep. But the jersey was kind of cool. I immediately, and again, while I was watching the documentary, I'm like, okay, so I've got to find a Trashers jersey. Now, 2004 to 2006, UHL jersey, it's not a thing. Not currently on eBay anyways. I'm sure that once this documentary has been seen by enough people, we will then see production of those jerseys yet again. But it is interesting because this is one of those stories that I really think that you could go into some of the leagues, you know, Federal League and other leagues like this, and you could probably find other stories about shady ownership, fly-by-night teams, and just really questionable decisions being made about where teams go, where teams don't go, this kind of thing. So I thought this was interesting enough to do a video on. A friend of mine, I was talking to him last night, and he said, so are you going to do a review for Untold on The Entertainment Guy or on The Hockey Guy? And I said, well, it's hockey related. I have to talk about this on The Hockey Guy. But yeah, fascinating stuff. Again, it's called Untold, Crime and Penalties. Cannot recommend it enough. It was a really good watch. It is an hour and 26 minutes, so it's not a really long watch, and it is TV mature. There's a lot of swearing in it. There's a lot of swearing in it. So just as like an aside, right? But yeah, it was fascinating. And again, I wanted to do this as kind of an add-on. Sort of like, here's some additional information without giving away much of what happens, because right at the start of the documentary, they make it clear that, okay, this was an operation that had some shady dealings and it crashed to a halt. So it's not like I'm giving away big spoilers here, but you know, at the beginning I thought, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. And then as it went, I was like really fascinated by this. And I know that Stamford, Connecticut, that's where WWE is their headquarters. I know that Connecticut and hockey, sure, makes sense, but man, there were some WWE tie-ins with this too that I found honestly kind of mind-blowing. Just imagining, you know, as a kid, you have a birthday party and it's like, oh, all right, hey, son, I got The Rock. The Rock's here. This is Triple H. And some of the other WWE guys as well. They're here for your birthday party. Dear Lord. That was where I was like, okay, this documentary's taking me a place I don't know. And then, you know, they have like John Cena's not in it. It's not like anybody from WWE is interviewed for this either. Believe me, they don't want anything to do with this. But, you know, John Cena being at a Trashers game. Oh, okay, cool. How does that happen? How does that? There's obviously other stuff that's not on this board. I'd be really interested to know. But it is a fun show. We have some weeks left until the season really gets started, so yeah, I recommend it. It was eye-opening, and I would love to see more stories like this told from around the hockey world, sports world in general. Also I believe it's also Untold. They had the Malice and the Palace that I watched last month, which was the big brawl between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons. And it really gave me a different perspective on that brawl than what I had when it took place. So these kinds of documentaries are fascinating. They're a lot of fun. And now I kind of want to go to Danbury. And I kind of want to see a hat factory. And I don't think there is one down there now. But hey, you know, you just never know. Maybe I just jump in and someday I bring back the Trashers. Who knows? Strange things happen in this world. But let me know your thoughts if you watch this. Because again, I don't know how many people are watching this. I don't know how. The other part of it too is that the thumbnail they use for this movie when you're scrolling through Netflix, it doesn't look like hockey. It really doesn't look like hockey at all. So I'm scrolling through and then I saw the trailer. I'm like, oh, it's a hockey thing. So people watching this may not even be aware that there's a hockey documentary of any sort. Hockey's kind of secondary, but yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, let me know your thoughts if you watched it in the comment section below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, there is hockey in Connecticut. I was going through all the hockey in Connecticut to get the names of the teams that have played in Danbury. And yeah, I don't know if the NHL ever would go back to Connecticut, but there could be some more fascinating stories with Connecticut-based teams. Stay tuned, I guess. But yeah, let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And hey, thank you guys so much for all your support. I'll talk to you again soon.